I pulled into my driveway after 2 exhausting weeks away, drained from a red-eye flight from Vancouver. My mother had suffered a stroke, and I'd spent every moment by her side through the worst of it. She was stable now, thankfully, but I was eager to get home to my wife, Margaret. She has early-onset Alzheimer's, and 2 weeks apart had felt like forever. The house was dark, which struck me as unusual. It was only 8 p.m., and Margaret always kept the living room lights on. I retrieved my suitcase from the trunk and went to unlock the door, fumbling for my keys. That's when I heard it, a faint rhythmic thumping sound coming from inside the house. My heart froze. I shoved the key into the lock and pushed the door open. The sound was clearer now, a muffled, desperate banging mixed with a weak voice. It was coming from the basement. I dropped my suitcase and ran to the basement door, only to find it locked from the outside with a heavy padlock I didn't recognize. The pounding grew louder, more frantic. "Margaret!" I shouted, hands shaking as I looked for something to break the lock. A faint cry came from the other side, trembling and weak. My wife. I sprinted to the garage, grabbed a crowbar and tore the lock off with 3 forceful yanks. The door swung open and the stench hit me. Sweat, urine and decay. I flicked on the light and nearly collapsed. Margaret was at the bottom of the stairs, filthy and shaking. Her nightgown was torn and stained, her face hollow, lips cracked and bleeding. She looked up at me, dazed and frightened. "Thomas," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Is that really you?" I rushed down, lifted her into my arms. She was shockingly light. How long had she been trapped down there? Without food, without water? "I'm here, sweetheart. I've got you," I said, carrying her upstairs as my mind raced. Who could have done this? How? I laid her on the couch and called 911, my hands trembling as I gave our address. Looking around, I noticed the house was different. Furniture rearranged, boxes stacked in corners I'd never seen before, and her pill organizer missing from the counter. Paramedics arrived quickly. Margaret was severely dehydrated, malnourished, and showing early signs of hypothermia despite the mild September weather. One paramedic asked, "Sir, when did you last see your wife?" 2 weeks ago, I said. I left her with our daughter. Jennifer was supposed to stay while I was in Vancouver. My mother had a stroke and... My voice broke. Jennifer did this. The paramedic exchanged a glance with her partner, but said nothing. They loaded Margaret onto a stretcher, and I rode with her to St. Michael's Hospital, holding her hand, whispering that she was safe, that I was sorry. At the hospital, they admitted her immediately. A nurse pulled me aside while the doctors worked. "Mr. Holloway," she asked, "was your wife locked in that basement for the entire 2 weeks you were away?" The question hit me like a freight train. 14 days. My wife trapped in darkness for 14 days. "I don't know," I whispered. "I just found her like that." An hour later, a detective from the Toronto Police Elder Abuse Unit arrived, Detective Morrison. I sat in the waiting room and told him everything. "My name is Thomas Holloway, 65, retired civil engineer. My wife, Margaret, is 63, diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's 2 years ago. It's been progressing slowly. She can still manage most things with help and structure. She knows me, knows our daughter, but she sometimes gets confused and loses track of time. Jennifer, our daughter, is 38. She's a CPA in downtown Toronto. Married to Kyle 3 years ago, a self-described business consultant who's always talking about cryptocurrency, NFTs, and passive income. I never trusted him, but Jennifer seemed happy, and that was enough for me. 2 weeks ago, my mother had a stroke in Vancouver. My sister called in a panic, and I took the first flight out. Jennifer immediately offered to stay with Margaret. "Don't worry, Dad," she said. "I'll take care of Mom. You just focus on Grandma." I was relieved. Jennifer knew her mother's schedule, medications and routines. I called home daily from Vancouver. For the first week, Jennifer answered cheerfully. "Mom's fine, Dad. We're watching her favorite shows. She's eating well. Don't worry." But during the second week, the calls went unanswered. She began texting instead. "Sorry, busy with Mom. She's fine. Talk later." But she never called back. When I tried reaching Margaret directly, her phone went straight to voicemail. I told myself everything was okay. Jennifer was handling things. My mother needed me, so I stayed. Detective Morrison listened carefully, taking notes. Then he asked something that made my stomach drop. "Mr. Holloway, during those 2 weeks, did you give your daughter power of attorney over your wife's affairs?" No, absolutely not. Did your wife sign any documents you know of? Not that I'm aware of. Why? He closed his notebook. We'll investigate further. This may be more than neglect. Margaret stayed hospitalized for 3 days. They rehydrated her, treated her for malnutrition and exposure, and ran extensive tests. She kept asking for Jennifer. Where's Jenny? She was just here. She was making me lunch. No, sweetheart, I said softly. She wasn't. On the second day, while Margaret slept, I went back home to look around again, to understand how everything had gone so wrong. What I found next made me sick to my stomach. The basement door had been locked from the outside with a padlock. Inside there was only a bucket in the corner, what Margaret had been forced to use as a toilet, and a thin blanket on the cold concrete. No food, no water, and the light bulb had been removed. My wife, who sometimes forgets small things but still laughs at old jokes and loves watching the Blue Jays, had been trapped in darkness for 2 weeks. Upstairs, I found more disturbing signs. Jennifer's laptop was still on the kitchen table, the password conveniently saved. I know it was wrong, but I opened it and looked through her files. What I found was deliberate and cruel. Scanned documents, power of attorney papers with Margaret's shaky signature, bank records, real estate forms, and a folder labelled Investment Opportunity, Kyle's Fund. My hands shook as I read through everything. Here's what they'd done. During the first week I was away, Jennifer took Margaret to a notary's office in Scarborough, not our family lawyer. She had her sign power of attorney documents, exploiting her Alzheimer's confusion by telling her it was paperwork for Dad. The notary didn't question it. With that document, Jennifer accessed our savings account, withdrawing $75,000, the money we'd saved for Margaret's care. Then she opened a home equity line of credit for another $100,000 against our mortgage-free home. In total, $175,000 was taken. Every dollar went to Thornhill Capital Management, Kyle's company. 3 clicks later, I found it was a numbered corporation he'd registered just 6 months ago, supposedly a cryptocurrency and blockchain consulting firm. In reality, it was nothing but a front for his scheme. They'd stolen from their own family and used Margaret's illness to do it. But what crushed me most was realizing why they'd locked her away. If I had called home, Margaret might have told me something was wrong. Even with Alzheimer's, she would have sensed it, so they silenced her. I found a text exchange between Jennifer and Kyle from the 3rd day. She keeps crying for your dad. This isn't going to work. She'll forget. Give it another day. The confusion helps. What if someone checks on her? Who? Dad's in Vancouver. Mom's friends haven't visited in months. We're fine. They had planned everything, knowingly locking a vulnerable woman in a basement to steal her savings. I called Detective Morrison immediately. He arrived with 2 officers, and I showed them everything. The laptop, documents, texts, and the basement itself. Mr. Holloway, he said carefully, this is elder abuse, financial exploitation, and unlawful confinement. We'll need your wife's testimony, but there's enough here for multiple charges. When I asked where my daughter was, he said they didn't know yet. I gave him Jennifer's address in Liberty Village, where she lived with Kyle. Within an hour, officers were at their condo. The place was nearly empty, furniture gone, closets cleared, but in the trash they found bank statements, one-way tickets to Portugal, and an email about a 6-month rental in Lisbon. They were planning to flee to a country without extradition for financial crimes. They would have succeeded if I hadn't come home early. My mother's recovery in Vancouver was faster than expected, and I returned 3 days sooner than planned. If I hadn't, Margaret might not have survived that basement. Jennifer and Kyle would have staged grief, claimed ignorance, and been gone before anyone asked questions. Detective Morrison didn't mince words. Your early return saved your wife's life. The thought that my daughter, the same girl I'd taught to ride a bike who once cried over a dead goldfish, was capable of letting her mother die for money was unbearable. Toronto police launched a manhunt. Within 48 hours, their faces were on the news. Reporters called non-stop, but I ignored them. My only concern was Margaret. She was released from the hospital 4 days later, physically improving, but mentally disoriented. She kept asking, "Is Jenny coming for dinner? And did I do something wrong?" How could I explain that her daughter had done the unthinkable? I couldn't. I simply held her hand and said, "Jenny's busy right now, but I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." On the 6th day, police arrested Jennifer and Kyle at Pearson Airport. They were trying to board a flight to London, their first stop before heading to Portugal. Border services flagged them, and within an hour, Detective Morrison called me. "We've got them. They're in custody." I felt nothing. No relief, just emptiness. The charges were severe. Elder abuse, financial exploitation of a vulnerable person, unlawful confinement, fraud over $5,000, and forgery of legal documents. Kyle faced additional charges for running a Ponzi scheme through his fake investment fund, which had taken from over 30 elderly investors with false promises of 40% returns. He was simply recycling funds to maintain the illusion. A week after their arrest, the Crown Attorney, Patricia Chen, met with me. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "this is one of the most serious elder abuse cases we've handled. The deliberate planning, the exploitation of your wife's condition, the financial loss, it's egregious. We'll pursue maximum sentencing." When I asked how long, she replied, "We're seeking 8 to 12 years for Jennifer and 10 to 15 for Kyle due to the additional fraud charges." As for the money, Patricia's expression softened. "That's the hard part. The fund's bankrupt. Most of it's gone, spent, hidden offshore or used to pay fake returns. We planned to pursue restitution orders, but Patricia warned me to stay realistic about recovery. The truth was the $175,000 was gone. Our savings, our home equity, all lost in Kyle's crypto scam. I asked the question that had haunted me for weeks. Did Jennifer know what Kyle was doing was fraud? Patricia opened the evidence file, emails and texts we'd recovered. Yes, she knew. She'd helped him recruit investors, including 2 of her co-workers. She'd even created fake financial statements. Jennifer wasn't a victim. She was a co-conspirator. The bail hearing was brutal. Her lawyer argued for release. No prior record, strong community ties, minimal flight risk despite the Portugal plans. The Crown disagreed, citing risk of flight, potential destruction of evidence, and danger to Margaret. The judge sided with the Crown. Bail denied. Jennifer and Kyle would stay in custody at the Toronto South Detention Centre until trial. I attended that hearing. I sat in the back, watching my daughter in an orange jumpsuit plead for freedom. She cried, apologized, mouthed, "Dad, please." I stood and walked out. I couldn't look at her. The criminal case went forward, but I wasn't willing to rely solely on the courts for justice. I hired a lawyer, Christopher Walsh, a partner at a firm specializing in elder law and estate litigation. His advice was straightforward. "Thomas, you have solid grounds for a civil suit. Go after them for everything. The money, the damages, the suffering they caused Margaret. Even if they're broke now, they might have assets later. Lock it down." 2 weeks later, I filed suit. Jennifer Holloway and Kyle Morrison were named as defendants. The claims included financial exploitation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, conversion, and breach of fiduciary duty. We sought $175,000 in stolen funds and $200,000 in additional damages for Margaret's suffering. But there was more to do. I contacted the College of CPAs of Ontario. Jennifer had used her credentials to make Kyle's scam appear legitimate. Her co-workers had trusted her professional judgment, and she had betrayed that trust. I filed a formal complaint. Within a month, her CPA license was suspended pending the criminal trial. If convicted, she'd be permanently disbarred and never work as an accountant again. It should have felt like justice, but it didn't, just necessary. The months that followed were a blur. Margaret's Alzheimer's worsened. Her neurologist explained that stress accelerates cognitive decline. She eventually stopped asking about Jennifer, which somehow felt even worse than her questions. It was as if her mind had erased her daughter to protect itself. I hired a full-time caregiver while managing the endless legal proceedings. The bills piled up. Medical costs, legal fees, and mortgage payments on the HELOC we'd never wanted. We were drowning financially, while the ones responsible sat in jail. The preliminary hearing came in January, 5 months after Margaret's rescue. I testified about finding her, uncovering the documents, realizing the betrayal. Jennifer's lawyer painted her as another victim, manipulated, desperate, mentally unwell. It was nonsense, and the judge saw through it. "Miss Holloway," the judge said, "you are a trained accountant. You knew exactly what you were doing." You exploited your mother's cognitive vulnerability for profit. There are no mitigating factors. The case was sent to trial, set for June, 8 months after everything began. But before the trial, something unexpected happened. Kyle's lawyer offered a deal. Kyle would plead guilty to all charges and testify against Jennifer in exchange for a reduced sentence. He'd claim she was the mastermind, and he had simply followed her lead. It was cowardly, throwing his wife under the bus to save himself, but Patricia called me. If Kyle testifies, she said, we'll have an airtight case. His cooperation, combined with the evidence, guarantees conviction and a strong sentence. Will he serve time? I asked. Yes, we're offering 8 years, parole after serving 2/3. He'll serve at least 5, she said. And Jennifer? Without the deal, she faces trial, with risk. But with Kyle's testimony, we'll push for the maximum, 12 years. I thought of Margaret, who sometimes still asked why Jenny never called. I thought of those 14 days in the basement, of the lost savings, the vanished trust. Take the deal, I said. Kyle pleaded guilty in February. The sentencing was brief. He read a statement of remorse, likely written by his lawyer. The judge was unmoved. Mr. Morrison, you preyed on vulnerable elderly individuals, including your mother-in-law. You chose profit over humanity. 8 years in federal prison. 1 down. Jennifer's trial began in June and lasted 3 weeks. The Crown presented everything, the forged POA, bank transfers, texts about fleeing to Portugal. They called Margaret to testify. Watching her on the stand, confused and frail, was unbearable. She forgot details, asked to go home. Jennifer's lawyer used that confusion to question her reliability. Then the Crown played the video, footage from the day police searched the basement. The cold, dark room, the bucket, the thin blanket, the scratch marks on the door. The jury was silent. Some cried. Then Kyle testified. He explained how Jennifer had initiated the plan, researching POA laws, finding a cooperative notary, scheduling everything around my trip. It was all her idea, he said. I just did what she told me. Even if self-serving, the evidence supported it. Jennifer's laptop searches confirmed she'd been researching elder exploitation and countries without extradition weeks before Margaret's stroke. She had planned everything. When Jennifer took the stand, it was a disaster. She claimed she'd only tried to help us, that Kyle had manipulated her, that she never intended harm. The Crown dismantled her story on cross-examination. Miss Holloway, the prosecutor said, you texted your husband. She'll forget. Give it another day. The confusion helps. Those were Jennifer's words, referring to her mother. The prosecutor asked what she had hoped her mother would forget. Silence. Then came the reminder. Miss Holloway, you locked your mother in a basement without food or water for 14 days. You stole her savings. You planned to flee the country. And you expect this court to believe you never meant harm. Jennifer broke down crying, but the jury remained unmoved. After 4 hours of deliberation, guilty on all counts. 2 months later came sentencing. I submitted a 5-page victim impact statement describing what this had done to Margaret, to me, and to our lives. How we'd lost not just money, but trust, safety, and family. Margaret had tried to write one too, but her Alzheimer's made it impossible. Her neurologist submitted a letter instead, explaining how the trauma had worsened her decline. The judge read everything, then looked directly at Jennifer. Miss Holloway, you are an educated, intelligent woman. You understood your mother's vulnerability and exploited it without conscience. You betrayed her trust and violated the most basic standards of decency. This court finds no mitigating factors. You are sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. I exhaled, thinking it was over. But it wasn't. A month later, the civil suit settled. Jennifer and Kyle were found jointly liable for $375,000. They didn't have the money. The court placed liens on any future income, property, or inheritance. Realistically, we'll never see a cent. The criminal restitution order added $175,000 plus interest, again unlikely to recover. We managed to roll the home equity loan into our mortgage, but now, for the first time in 2 decades, we have payments again. Payments we'll likely carry for the rest of our lives. Margaret's care costs continue to rise as her Alzheimer's progresses. Insurance covers part of it, but not enough. I may need to sell the house within a few years to afford memory care. Jennifer is at the Grand Valley Institution for Women, about an hour west of Toronto. She'll be eligible for parole in 8 years. Kyle is at Joyceville, a medium-security prison near Kingston, eligible in 5. I haven't visited, and I won't. To me, I no longer have a daughter. People sometimes ask if I regret pressing charges so firmly, or if 12 years was too severe. My answer never changes. Jennifer locked her confused, frightened mother in a basement for 2 weeks. She drained the savings meant for her mother's final years. She planned to let her die and flee with the money. She acted knowingly and without remorse. 12 years isn't harsh, it's mercy. Margaret no longer understands where Jennifer is. Occasionally she asks, and I tell her Jennifer is away for work. It's easier than explaining the truth she wouldn't remember anyway. Last month, Margaret forgot who I was for the first time. She looked straight at me and asked what I was doing in her house. It lasted an hour before she recognized me again. But I know what it means. The final stage has begun. Sometimes I think about how Jennifer didn't just steal our money, she stole our time. The time Margaret and I had left before the Alzheimer's took everything. Those 2 weeks should have been ours. Instead, Margaret spent them in misery. That's what I can't forgive. The money, the house, they can be replaced. But those 14 days, and every day after filled with stress and fear, are gone forever. So no, I don't regret the 12 years. I'd do it again. Justice isn't revenge, it's accountability. It's standing firm and saying some actions cannot be excused. My daughter learned that the hard way. I hope others learn it the easy way, that trust within a family is sacred. Break it, and the consequences will break you in return. As for me and Margaret, we're still here, still standing, still together. That's more than Jennifer wanted for us, and more than she'll have for the next 12 years. And honestly, that's the only justice that truly matters.